Let me ask you this. When you create a character on Exile's Reach, what is the first reason you can think about? I'll give you 5 seconds to think on it. There are 2 reasons that most of you probably came up with. The first one is to level faster, while the second one is to have a different story than the regular starting zones. Both of those are equally fair reasons. As a player that has spent 100 hours on Exile's Reach and invested 8 months on this one zone, it would be crazy to think that there would be any lore on Exile's Reach. But today, I'll prove that wrong and show you what lore is on the island. So without further ado, let's get right into it. As crazy as it sounds, the lore of the island traces to the very first lines of the NPCs Captain Garrick and Warlord Vrykul. Here's what they said.
Look sharp, recruit! We're almost to the island!
Recruit, step forward. We're approaching the island.
In addition, both quotes said similar quotes saying,
We need to be ready for anything. Show me your skill in combat.
I need everyone in top form if we're to complete this mission. Show me what you can do.
Interestingly, on the closest island is a Horde encampment where Forsaken catapults are at and other Horde assets as well. Not only that, there's a high elvish structure as well, which can lead to a couple really interesting theories. But before we get right into that, to help you understand what's going on, let's take a small history lesson on Stormhiem's lore. Welcome to Stormhiem, which is on the continent of the Broken Isles and geographically the closest to Exile's Reach. When you begin the story for both sides of Stormhiem, the Horde and Alliance are ignorant of the threat, the Burning Legion destroying Azeroth because they want to
kill each other just because they can.
Apparently, Jen Greymane is not so happy about Sylvanas killing the sun, remember Cataclysm, so they get into a fight and try to destroy this Dark Ranger. Another thing to note is that Murlocs dwell on Stormhiem, just like Exile's Reach. These Murlocs are good friends with the Naga, they partner together. And in addition, there's also a majority of Vrykul that live in Stormhiem. These bad boys dwell in most parts of Stormhiem, and for most of the time we spend in Stormhiem, we fight these guys because I guess they're just not so nice to us. Anyways, when we go back to Exile's Reach, all the pieces come entirely together. Here's how it goes. Captain Garrick and Warlord Vrykul recruit you as a new soldier of their own faction. They want you to claim this island that they found nearby on the mainland of Exile's Reach. The first order they give you is to warm up against a training dummy. Because there's no shaman on the boat, the shamans in Orgrimmar and Stormhiem will misinform the leaders, and after you finish killing the training dummy, both of them realize that there's rain coming, which should have not happened. You spar with either Garrick's son or Thrall and emerge victorious. After a duel, thunder rolls in and the sky darkens. Each of the crews brace for shipwreck and all the members survive. Before I continue, I want to make a point here that the way we get to Exile's Reach is quite weird. Apparently, since we're so far from the mainland, it almost seems impossible that we would make it entirely over. The Horde has a lot of islands around them where they were likely to be shipwrecked, and if the Alliance somehow tried getting over to Exile's Reach, there's a big island up north from the mainland. Whatever happened, at this point the story kinda got weirded out and it just doesn't feel as realistic. Here's what's really interesting. In both cinematics, there's crewmates that we don't ever see on Exile's Reach. On the Alliance, there's a regular Coultier's human and a regular white human, I think, has a Zandalari and an undead or something, I don't know what that is either. And what's strange is that since they're not part of the storyline in any way, and we don't see them at all, I think it's safe to say that this is a vision of the initial expedition crew. By the time we somehow hit shore, we discovered that there are Murlocs that stole our supplies. If you remember, there are Naga Ruins on the other islands, which means in theory, the Naga and the two factions must have fought in a battle, took it to sea, and we don't find them again. Well, most of them. In the lore, Murlocs are essentially servants of the Naga and faithful to them, which could lead to the reason why the storm came so abruptly. Here's what some of the expedition members said.
Quite the storm. Probably hit the first boat, too.
Nasty storm. It must have hit the first boat, too.
Just the fact that the undead and dwarfs said the exact same thing gives us further reason to why the first expedition must have gone missing. Strangely, Shuja Grimax was able to notify the Horde and get rescued, only to find herself in the same location again. Anyways, as we keep adventuring, we discover part of the initial crew is trapped in Haroon's barrow. What must have happened to Haroon, the exiled, is that he was once an undead from the initial expedition and must have gotten corrupted by the harpies, leading him to be mind controlled by them. And with that said, what could have happened is that the magical and special powers that Haroon has now gives him the ability to mind control the spiders in the cave. So, I believe those Murlocs might have found a couple of crewmates from the first expedition, brought them over to Haroon's barrow, and then spiders captured them in that spider web so they couldn't escape. By the way, if you notice, Krenna Earthdaughter and Ralia Dreamchaser feel very bad when they saw that the spider's home was destroyed, which is weird to think about considering that only evilness and horrible things went on in that cave. After this point, I don't see any further lore connection except the fact that the ogres are not being nice to us and want to probably kill us. I mean, we can clearly see that they're enemies. Either way, that's really all for the lore for Exile's Reach. I have two final things to talk about related to Exile's Reach's lore today. You might have seen one of my recent videos of the short story of a human and a troll. If you haven't, feel free to check it out in the description below. The reason it's so important to mention it is because the two characters are living on one of the most critical places on Exile's Reach in terms of the lore theories I told you about today. The Horde assets are from the initial expedition. The Naga Ruins could be a place the Alliance expedition set camp at. There's so much evidence of Naga, Vrykul, and so much more there, which explains exactly why I put Port Othermon and Holy Exile there.
But wait, when's the next short story of a human and a troll?
If you're curious, I might be posting the third part of the story in a month or two, because I haven't figured out the details yet. That's totally okay. The second thing I want to talk to you about is what changes they made to the lore and how that affects the story that I was able to theorize. When you did starter experience in the Shadows and Dragonflight, where did it put you? It put you in battle for Azeroth. You had to come into the war against that opposing faction. However, in the war within, they screwed the story up by placing us in Dragonflight and saying that Captain Garrick and Warlord Brekka are now friends that fought in the Second War. If they kept the mainstream expansion to Battle for Azeroth, this story that I told you about would have made so much sense. Now that it's changed, it's not as relevant. To recap what we did today, we figured out the possible lore that could be realistic outside of Exile's Reach, looked at the short story of a human and troll's connection to the lore, and the real ending for Exile's Reach. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, this is Utilitymonk, signing out.